Human evolution. We've come a long way since evolving over 2 million years ago, from our late first ancestor, Ardipithecus, to Lucy, to our close relative, the Neanderthal. We've done a lot to get to where we are right now. And the question I propose to you today is, where do we go next? What is the next step in our evolution? But before we can understand what's next, we have to understand what was and how exactly we got to the place we are now. And that's been through a monotony of different processes over the course of the human timetable, some of which can include mutations, genetic drift, gene flow. However, one of the biggest movers has been natural selection and adaptation through it. Now, natural selection is essentially the process of selecting the strongest individuals, or the individuals that have traits that are beneficial to surviving in whatever environment, that environment being on Earth, primarily in Africa, going into the Levant, into Mesopotamia where civilization first started, and the traits that benefited human society going into our migrations. Those were the traits that got passed on to the descendants of our ancient ancestors. And essentially, what natural selection means is the traits that are most beneficial for gathering resources are the ones that often the people who carry those traits, often they have more resources to provide, therefore they can have more children and they have more abundance, which means they are a greater percentage of the total gene pool. And once those traits outpopulate the other ones, then they become the main the main genetic force in the gene pool, causing them to be the next stage in human evolution. Now, because of technology, we as humans have been able to bypass these natural selection processes and completely made them obsolete. Technology has allowed us to overcome any resource deficiency within our environment, leading us to have an overabundance regardless of what advantages we have as a species. Additionally, the other main driver of evolution, mutations, have basically become negligible to the point where if a group of humans had developed a mutation in any region of the world, we are so cross-culturally interconnected that the effect of a few group of people having a certain type of mutation just gets negated by the massive amount of human beings existing on this planet. And because we're so connected, it just becomes a drop in the bucket. And eventually we'll get to a point where all of the human gene pool will be fairly similar to one another, which leads us to an interesting question, which is, are we still evolving? I don't think we've stopped evolving. I just think that my hypothesis is that we've been doing it, we're doing it in a different way now. We've gotten rid of the need for natural selection. Therefore, the natural order of things of how we've been doing it for the past million years just doesn't apply anymore. And the main reason why I think that is because of the culture, right? There's no longer a need where we have to pick for the biggest traits anymore. I think that human culture, human society has made our selection preferences different to what they would have been naturally in, say, in animals or in our prehistoric ancestors. We now look for different genetic traits that could provide an advantage. We don't think about it as in terms of survival of the fittest. It's just something we do now.
You good.
Okay. Okay. And finally, to answer the first question about where we're going as a species, I believe that we are going to see evolutionary change within the next 10,000 years, even less than that almost. And it sounds crazy because the evolutionary timeline, it usually takes hundreds of thousands to millions of years for actual change to happen. But I think that as a species, we've gone to a point where we change our situation on, yearly. If you look at what we've done to plants, to like corn, vegetables, dogs, animals that we've domesticated, it's incredible the way we've been able to change species that exist today to suit our needs. Like corn used to be the size of my finger. It used to be like wheat. You couldn't even tell. And now it's like this big pompous thing that feeds millions of people across the world. And just looking at that and looking at where we are now, I don't think that we're going to be stagnant. We are going to see changes in a couple thousand years. And I think that as we talked about, that the old drivers of evolution, they don't apply to us anymore. Natural selection, mutation, that's not something that it's going to affect us in the future anymore. And I think it comes down to three things in terms of where we're going. And it will come down to three main drivers, and that they're going to be sexual selection. Sexual selection is going to be a huge driver. Space, colonization of space, and then cybernetics and genetic alterations. Those are going to be the three main drivers in the future. Really quickly, sexual selection is going to be huge because we already see it today. We don't need to pick for traits like that help us survive and help us adapt to situations. We don't need that anymore. We change our environment to suit our needs. We don't change ourselves to suit the environment anymore. Nowadays, we just pick for, attraction or what we like better. But those are all physical things that don't actually affect us in the long run as a species. Second, if we do make it out and actually start colonizing space and go to places like the moon and Jupiter and Mars and the moons of Jupiter, like Io, Ganymede, all of that, if we actually do colonize space, we are going to see basically a genetic drift where we will have populations of humans across, the solar system. And there's plenty of science fiction out there that talks about this. But it's true. We're going to have populations separated from the main population, creating new gene pools where those traits of the people living there are going to be able to actually embed themselves in those populations. And we're going to see change happen rapidly. And that's very exciting. And if we get there, we're going to see different types of people that exist. And that'll be cool. Third, the final one is going to be cybernetics and genetic modification. Primarily, because we're so dependent on technology, if we end up developing things like Neuralink and other AI, technologies that embed themselves in our physiology, we could see a future where people who are predisposed who have conditions where they're more able to interact with the cybernetic technology more easily, they're going to have access to more opportunities in terms of resource gathering. And I think that in the future, because resources will become harder and harder for people to obtain. Like if you look at now, like Western society, our birth rates are down, and that's simply due to the fact that there's just not enough resources out there. Kids are expensive. There's just not enough resources out there to have large amounts of kids anymore. It's a real cost. And if you're able to bring in enough resources to have as many kids as you want and not even worry about the economical burden of it, you're going to have more kids. And those kids, those traits that you pass down, which those traits that you pass down, since you have more resources due to things like cybernetics and all that, those traits will become the main population in the future. And I think it's a cool thing to entertain, and that will be a huge driver in the way we shift. And it's a fascinating thing to talk about. But yeah,